I'll be straight with you right from the start. Your brain is only designed to sleep in complete darkness, not in light like modern bedrooms. Over approximately 200,000 years of Homo sapiens evolution, humans always slept in an environment with almost no light, and it was only at the end of the 19th century, when Thomas Edison commercialized the light bulb in 1879, that we began to change that. A typical bedroom in the US today has light levels from 5 to 100 lux, while research from Harvard Medical School shows that just about 10 lux is enough to affect the brain's biological activity. Light from phones or TVs at night, especially blue light, can directly impact your nervous system without you realizing it. The problem isn't that you're sleeping wrong, but that the environment you're sleeping in isn't suitable for how the body is designed. When you close your eyes, your brain doesn't turn off. It still continuously reads light signals around to decide if it's day or night. So the real question isn't how long you sleep, but under what conditions you're sleeping, because the only environment where the brain functions correctly is complete darkness. If you understand this mechanism, everything will change completely. Light is not only to help you see, it is a biological signal that goes straight into the brain and controls how the body operates. When light enters the eyes, it is not only processed to create images, but also activates a special group of cells in the retina called iPRGCs, which are most sensitive to blue light at a wavelength of about 480 nanometers, exactly the type of light emitted from phones and LED screens. From there, the signal is sent directly to a small region in the brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, or SCN, located in the hypothalamus. The SCN has only about 20,000 neurons, but it functions as the central biological clock that controls nearly the entire system in the body, from hormones and temperature to the sleep-wake cycle. What is important is that the SCN does not care what you think or feel. It does not need you to feel light. It only needs photons, only needs the presence of light to activate. Research by Charles Czeisler at Harvard shows that even weak light at night can alter the circadian rhythm. When you turn on a light or look at a screen at 11 p.m., the SCN receives the signal as if the sun has not yet set. There is one thing that most people do not realize. Your biological clock does not run according to your work schedule or the wall clock, but it runs according to light, and it often drifts from what you think is the right time. Since the 1960s, biologist Jürgen Aschoff pointed out that the natural human circadian rhythm is not exactly 24 hours, but about 24.2 hours. This small number creates a big difference, because without adjustment signals from the environment, especially light, your body will gradually drift away from the standard day-night cycle. This has been clearly proven in the famous 1962 experiment by Michel Siffre, when he lived alone in a deep cave underground for many weeks with no sunlight, no clock, and no time signals at all. After a while, his sleep-wake cycle began to lengthen. His days were no longer 24 hours, and eventually he completely lost his sense of real time. This shows that your body does not know what time it is. It only knows whether there is light or not. Morning light plays an extremely strong signaling role, helping to reset the biological clock every day. When natural light hits your eyes in the morning, the SCN receives the signal that a new day has begun and resynchronizes the entire system inside the body. But when light appears at night, especially artificial light, this signal is completely disrupted. Instead of preparing the body to rest, you are unintentionally telling the brain that daytime is still continuing. This creates the phenomenon of phase delay, similar to jet lag, but happening every day, even though you are not crossing any time zones. A 2019 study from the University of Colorado showed that exposure to electric light in the evening can delay the timing of melatonin release by 2 to 3 hours, meaning your body thinks night arrives later than it actually does. This is why you may not feel sleepy at night, but find it extremely difficult to wake up in the morning. Many people in the United States today are living in a state that scientists call social jet lag, a form of chronic circadian misalignment due to the lack of synchronization between the biological clock and social schedule. You go to bed according to the clock, but your body does not follow. You wake up according to the alarm, but your biological clock is still in nighttime mode. And the important thing is, you do not really control your sleep timing the way you think. You can decide when to go to bed, but you cannot decide when your body is ready to sleep. The clock inside you does not listen to willpower. It responds to light. So if the light you are exposed to is at the wrong time, the entire system will shift accordingly. When you feel tired, unfocused, or have trouble sleeping, the problem is not that you lack discipline or have not slept enough. A very common misunderstanding that I want you to eliminate right now is that darkness is not nothing. It is not an empty space after light disappears, but it is an active biological signal, a signal that your body has been programmed to recognize and respond to over hundreds of thousands of years. When light levels in the environment drop below a certain threshold, about 10 lux according to Harvard Medical School studies from 2011, a series of biological reactions begins to be activated. Light at this level is very low, much lower than the light in most modern bedrooms. And that means even a very small amount of light can be enough to prevent this system from functioning correctly. When light drops below that threshold, the pineal gland in the brain begins to produce melatonin, not because you want to sleep, but because your body has just received the signal that night has begun. This is an automatic response, independent of willpower and independent of your subjective feelings. You may think your room is dark enough, but if light from street lamps leaks through the curtains, if the LED lights on electronic devices are still on, or if you just looked at your phone screen before closing your eyes, then it is very likely you have never truly entered biological darkness. And this is more important than you think, because modern LED light, especially blue light in the wavelength range of 460 to 480 nanometers, has a strong ability to activate the iPRGC cells I mentioned earlier, making the brain mistakenly think it is still daytime, even when the light intensity is very low. That means dim light is not harmless. It is only weak enough that you do not notice it, but strong enough to disrupt the system inside you. When the body truly receives the correct darkness signal, it switches to a state you can call night mode, a completely different operating mode from daytime. In this state, body temperature begins to drop by about 0.5 to 1 degree C, heart rate slows down, blood pressure decreases, and a series of biological repair processes are activated. Enzymes involved in DNA repair increase activity, helping to repair damage accumulated during the day from oxidative stress and environmental factors. These are not optional processes, but essential functions to maintain the long-term stability of the body. If you do not provide the conditions for them to occur, they will not happen fully. What is noteworthy is that your body does not respond in a simple on-off way, but it needs a clear signal. Strong daytime light tells the body it is time to be active. Deep nighttime darkness tells it is time to recover. But dim light in between these two states creates a dangerous gray zone where the daytime system does not completely shut down and the nighttime system cannot fully turn on. You can imagine it like a room where the lights never completely turn off, only dim to a very low level, enough for you to think you are in darkness, but the electrical system is still operating. That is exactly what happens in your brain when you sleep in an environment with dim light. You do not receive a clear signal that night has begun, and therefore your body does not fully switch states. This explains why many people can sleep a full 7 or 8 hours, but still feel tired when they wake up, because they have never truly entered the deep recovery state the body needs. Your body does not need more light at night. It needs a clear separation between light and dark. In a natural environment, this transition is very clear. The sun sets, light decreases rapidly, and darkness envelops everything. But in the modern environment, light never completely disappears. It only decreases to a level that feels comfortable to you. And that is the problem, because your body is not designed to operate in an environment that always has low-level light. It is designed to respond to two clear states, light and dark. And when you blur the boundary between these two states, you also blur the signals that the body relies on to function. If you want to understand exactly what happens when the body receives darkness, you must understand what melatonin really is, because most of what you have heard about it is not entirely correct. Melatonin was discovered in 1958 by Aaron B. Lerner at Yale, and from the beginning it was misunderstood as a sleep-inducing hormone, something you could take to fall asleep faster. But that is not its main function. Melatonin is not what makes you sleep. It is the signal that tells the entire body that darkness has arrived. It is like a biological announcement sent simultaneously to the brain, immune system, cardiovascular system, and nearly every cell in the body, saying it is time to switch to night mode. When light levels drop low enough, the pineal gland begins to release melatonin, and its concentration gradually increases over time, peaking around 2 to 4 a.m. in a normal cycle. This is not random, but a precisely timed rhythm, adjusted according to environmental light. But what is noteworthy is that this system is extremely sensitive. Even a relatively small amount of light can disrupt this process. Studies show that light at about 30 lux, equivalent to dim light in a living room, can reduce the amount of melatonin the body produces by more than 50%. That means you do not need bright light to break this system. Just light bright enough to see by is enough to send the wrong signal to the brain. The famous 2015 Harvard study showed that using an iPad before bed not only reduces melatonin, but also delays the timing of this hormone's release, making you feel sleepy later and reducing sleep quality. And this is not just a problem of sleep timing, but of the biological structure of sleep. When melatonin is suppressed or delayed, the entire chain of biological reactions behind it is also affected. Melatonin acts as a powerful antioxidant, helping to neutralize free radicals accumulated during the day. And it also participates in regulating the immune system, helping the body prepare for recovery. But all these functions depend on melatonin being released at the right time and in the right amount. If you interfere with the input signal, that is light, you not only affect sleep, but also affect the body's self-repair ability. This is the point that many people overlook when they try to solve sleep problems by supplementing melatonin in pill form. They think the problem is a lack of the hormone, but in reality, the problem is a lack of the activating signal. Your body is not designed to receive melatonin from outside. It is designed to produce it itself when it receives the correct conditions, and that condition is darkness. When you take melatonin, you are trying to force the system to work without providing the appropriate input signal, like trying to turn on a machine without supplying the right power source. You may see temporary results, but you are not addressing the root cause, and this leads to a big misunderstanding. People think melatonin is the solution, while in reality, it is only one part of a system that responds to the environment. If the environment is wrong, the system will be wrong, no matter how much you supplement. What is important is not whether you have enough melatonin or not, but whether your body receives the signal to produce melatonin or not. And that signal is not a pill, but darkness. When you provide real darkness, not dim light, not reduced light, but the complete absence of stimulating light, your body will automatically activate this process without your intervention. This is a system that has been optimized over hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, and it works best when you do not disrupt it. The next important point I want you to see clearly is that sleep is not a simple on or off state, but a tightly organized sequence of stages, and light can disrupt that sequence in ways you do not realize. When you sleep, you do not fall into a single state, but go through multiple cycles, consisting of NREM, non-rapid eye movement, and REM, rapid eye movement, each cycle lasting about 90 minutes and repeating 4 to 6 times per night. In NREM, especially stage N3, also called deep sleep, your body performs the most important recovery processes, reducing neural activity, repairing tissues, strengthening the immune system, and rebalancing energy. This is the stage where brain waves slow down significantly, and you are very difficult to wake. But what many people do not know is that this stage is extremely sensitive to the environment, especially light. A 2022 study from Northwestern University showed that people who sleep in an environment with light, even weak light at about 10-20 lux, have significantly reduced deep sleep time and higher heart rates compared to those who sleep in complete darkness. This means that although they sleep the same number of hours, their bodies do not truly enter the optimal recovery state. Light does not only affect how easily you fall asleep or have trouble sleeping, but it directly impacts the internal structure of sleep, changing the ratio between NREM and REM stages. When melatonin is suppressed, as I explained earlier, the transition from one stage to another becomes less efficient. You may fall asleep, but you do not go deep into sleep, and that creates a very familiar feeling. You sleep a full 7 or 8 hours, but still wake up tired, lacking energy, and having trouble concentrating. This happens because your brain does not simply turn off when you sleep. It is switching to a different mode, a mode designed for repair, optimization, and restructuring neural connections. You can imagine it like a computer system that needs to go into maintenance mode at night to update and fix errors. If you do not allow that system to fully switch to maintenance mode, it will continue running in normal operating mode, and the repair processes will be delayed or incomplete. Light is the factor that prevents this transition. When light continues to be present, even at low levels, the SCN still receives the signal that the environment has not fully switched to night, and that keeps part of the daytime system still active. This is not enough to wake you up, but it is enough to disrupt the deep transition necessary for recovery. Polysomnography studies, which measure brain waves during sleep, have shown that nighttime light increases the number of micro-awakenings. Those times you wake for a few seconds without realizing it, but enough to break the continuity of deep sleep. These small disruptions accumulate over time and reduce the overall effectiveness of sleep. In addition, light also affects the autonomic nervous system, keeping the sympathetic system more active than normal during sleep, preventing heart rate and blood pressure from dropping to the levels needed for recovery. This has been documented in many studies, including research from the American Heart Association on the link between poor sleep and cardiovascular health. The important thing I want you to understand is that you cannot evaluate sleep quality just by the number of hours you spend in bed. Time is a very crude variable, while what really matters is the biological state you achieve during that time, and that state depends directly on environmental signals, especially light. If that signal is wrong, the entire sleep structure will be altered, even if you do not realize it. So when you think you are sleeping enough, ask yourself a more accurate question. Have you truly entered the deep recovery state your body needs, or not? Because sleep is not just the time you spend lying down, but a complex biological state controlled by light and darkness. And if you do not provide darkness correctly, that state will never be fully activated. Now I want you to look at the whole issue from a completely different angle, because what I am about to say will reverse the way you think about sleep. Most people do not really have a sleep problem. They have a problem with the light environment they live in every day. If you look at the data, you will see this is not speculation. A 2021 Pew Research Center report shows that more than 80% of adults in the United States use electronic devices like phones, tablets, or TVs within 1 hour before going to bed. That means the majority of the population is directing light straight into their eyes, right at the time the body needs darkness the most. And this is not normal light. Light emitted from LED screens, especially blue light in the 460 most to 480 nanometer range, has a strong ability to activate the iPRGC cells I explained earlier, making the brain think it is still daytime. The 2015 Harvard study showed that reading on an iPad at night not only reduces melatonin, but also delays the circadian rhythm, making users feel sleepy later and less alert the next morning. This is not a small effect, but a direct change in how the biological clock operates. When you look at a screen at 11 p.m., your body does not know it is 11 p.m. It only knows there is light, and that light has characteristics similar to daytime light, and therefore it responds accordingly. This brings us to a very important point I want you to rethink, The modern bedroom is nothing like the environment your body is designed to function in. In the evolutionary environment, when the sun set, light decreased very quickly, and complete darkness enveloped everything. There were no night lights, no screens, no street light leaking through windows. But in the modern environment, light never completely disappears. It only decreases to a level that feels comfortable to you, but is still enough to send the wrong signal to the brain. And this happens every night, repeating continuously, creating a form of chronic signal noise that you do not realize. Many people believe insomnia is a natural part of aging, that as you get older you will sleep worse, wake up more, and feel more tired. But this is not entirely true. There are many studies showing that most of the decline in sleep quality does not come from age, but from changes in the environment and behavior, especially exposure to light at the wrong times. When you remove the wrong light factor, many people's sleep improves significantly, regardless of age. This shows the problem is not that the body is broken, but in the signals the body is receiving. Your body still operates according to the same principles as tens of thousands of years ago, but the environment around you has changed completely. And when the input signal changes, the response system also changes. You may think you have trouble sleeping because of stress, work, caffeine, or age, but if you overlook the light factor, you are overlooking the most important variable in the entire system. This is why many common solutions, like sleeping pills, supplements, or relaxation techniques, only provide limited effectiveness. They try to adjust the system from the inside, while the environmental input signal remains wrong. You are trying to fix a machine while still feeding it incorrect data, and that machine will continue to respond according to the data it receives. When you change the light environment, especially reducing light at night and increasing natural light in the morning, you are changing the input signal, and the system begins to self-adjust. You do not need to teach the body how to sleep. It already knows how to sleep. You just need to provide the right conditions. This is the point where everything starts to become much simpler. Instead of asking, why can't I sleep? You start asking, what signal am I sending to my brain? And when you change the question, the answer also changes. If your environment matches the way the body is designed, sleep will self-adjust accordingly. There is one function of sleep that, if you understand it, you will never take your sleep environment lightly again, because it is directly related to whether your brain can clean itself or not. In 2012, scientist Mike and Nedegard at the University of Rochester published a discovery that completely changed the way we understand sleep, the existence of the glymphatic system in the brain. Before that, it was believed that the brain did not have a garbage disposal system like the rest of the body, because it lacked a traditional lymphatic system. But this research showed that the brain has its own mechanism, using cerebrospinal fluid to wash away waste accumulated throughout the day. You can imagine this system as a microscopic drainage network, where fluid flows through brain tissue, carrying away excess molecules, misfolded proteins, and metabolic byproducts. What is important is that this system does not work efficiently when you are awake. It only works powerfully when you sleep, especially during the deep NREM stage I mentioned earlier. In this state, the brain's electrical activity decreases, and neurons shrink slightly, making the spaces between cells expand by up to 60%, according to data from Nedegard's own study. This expansion allows cerebrospinal fluid to flow more easily, like widening pipes to increase water flow. And this is the key point. When this flow increases, the ability to remove waste also increases. One of the substances removed is beta amyloid, a protein that tends to accumulate and form plaques in the brains of people with Alzheimer's disease. Many studies, including reports from the National Institutes of Health, have shown that lack of sleep, or poor quality sleep, is linked to the accumulation of these proteins over time. That means if you do not allow the glymphatic system to function fully every night, you are letting waste gradually build up in the brain, like a city without an effective waste management system. But what makes this problem even more serious is the sensitivity of this system to light. As I explained, Nighttime light reduces the duration and quality of deep sleep. And since the glymphatic system depends on deep sleep, any factor that disrupts this stage will also reduce the efficiency of the waste disposal system. Brain imaging studies show that when sleep is fragmented or shallower, the flow of cerebrospinal fluid decreases significantly, meaning less waste is removed. This is not an effect that happens immediately and that you can clearly feel the next morning. It is a cumulative process. If you sleep in an environment with dim light every night for many years, you are reducing the efficiency of an important maintenance system that your brain depends on. And over time, these small deficits begin to add up. This is why scientists are increasingly interested in the link between sleep and neurodegenerative diseases. You do not just sleep to rest. You are performing a biological sanitation process where your brain removes things it no longer needs. And if that process is disrupted, the consequences will not appear immediately, but they will appear. You may not feel the difference after one night, but after thousands of nights, that difference becomes significant. The important thing I want you to understand is that the glymphatic system is not something you can turn on at will. It depends entirely on the biological state you achieve during sleep, and that state depends on the environment, especially light. If the environment is not dark enough to allow you to enter stable deep sleep, this system will never operate at its optimal level. And that brings us back to the starting point. The problem is not how long you sleep, but whether you provide the conditions for the brain to perform the functions it is designed to perform or not. Darkness is not an optional factor in this process. It is a necessary condition. Without it, the system still works, but it never reaches the efficiency it was designed to achieve. This leads us to an important consequence that many people feel every day but do not know the cause. The way you remember, learn, and think depends directly on the quality of sleep you achieve in darkness. When you are awake, your brain continuously receives new information, from small details in life to complex knowledge, and all that information is initially stored temporarily in a structure called the hippocampus. But the hippocampus is not the place for long-term storage. It is like a buffer, a transfer region. For these memories to become stable, they must be transferred to the cortex, where long-term storage takes place. And this transfer process does not happen while you are awake, but occurs mainly when you sleep, especially during deep NREM sleep. In this stage, slow brain waves allow the hippocampus to replay the neural activity patterns that occurred during the day, synchronizing them with the cortex to form long-term memories. This is a process that can be measured by EEG and has been confirmed in many neuroscience studies. Scientist Matthew Walker at the University of California, Berkeley, has shown that lack of sleep can reduce the ability to learn and remember by up to about 40%, not because you lack effort, but because your brain cannot transfer information from a temporary state to a stable state. When you do not achieve true deep sleep, this process is disrupted. But the problem does not stop there. Sleep is not only NREM, but also REM, a stage characterized by high brain activity and rapid eye movements, where emotional memories are processed and integrated. REM helps you connect disparate pieces of information, find connections, and even create new ideas. When the REM and NREM cycles are disrupted, the entire brain information processing system is affected. Nighttime light is one of the factors that disrupts this cycle. When you are exposed to light before or during sleep, melatonin is suppressed, and this changes the way you go through the sleep stages. You may still sleep a full 7 or 8 hours, but the time you spend in deep NREM and REM can be significantly reduced. This is why many people wake up feeling tired, even though they believe they have slept enough. The problem is not in the number of hours, but in the structure. If the sleep structure is broken, its function is also broken. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change and adapt, depends on the processes that occur during high-quality sleep. Synapses are strengthened or eliminated. Neural networks are optimized based on what you have experienced. If this process does not occur fully, you not only learn worse, but also lose the ability to improve over time. Studies in neuroscience show that poor quality sleep is linked to memory decline, reduced concentration ability, and slower reactions. These changes do not happen immediately, but accumulate day by day. You may not notice after one night, but after many months or years, the difference becomes clear. The important thing is that all these processes depend on the biological state you achieve while sleeping, and that state depends directly on the light environment. If you do not provide enough darkness for the body to fully switch to night mode, you do not allow the brain to perform the functions it is designed to perform. This means you may be living, learning, and receiving information every day, but not truly integrating them in the most effective way. So when you think about your memory and cognitive abilities, do not just think about effort or the time you spend learning. Think about the conditions you provide for the brain to process that information. Darkness is not a secondary factor. It is the foundation for this entire system to function correctly. One of the biggest misunderstandings about sleep is the idea that when you sleep, the brain turns off, as if you are cutting the power to a machine. But this is completely wrong biologically. Even when you are in deep sleep, your brain still consumes about 20% of the body's total energy, a figure confirmed through decades of neuroscience research, from PET scan studies in the 1990s to modern fMRI techniques. That means the brain does not stop working. It only changes the way it works. When you are awake, energy is used to process information from the environment, control actions, and respond. But when you sleep, especially during deep enremendation stages, the brain switches to a different mode, a mode focused on repair, optimization, and restructuring neural networks. Scientists call part of this activity the default mode network, a system that continues to maintain background activity, even when you are doing nothing. And during sleep, this network does not disappear, but changes its role, supporting internal processes, such as memory consolidation and information reorganization. Research from Harvard Medical School and many other neuroscience centers shows that during deep sleep, the brain minimizes signals from the outside and greatly increases internal processes, including cell repair, neurochemical balance, and synapse connection adjustment. This is a highly organized process, like a system switching from operating mode to maintenance mode. And the important thing is that this transition does not happen just because you close your eyes or lie down. It depends on environmental signals, especially light. When light is still present, even at low levels, the SCN still receives the signal that the environment has not fully switched to night, and that keeps part of the brain system still operating in daytime mode. You do not fully wake up, but you also do not fully switch to recovery state. You are stuck in between. This is like a computer that you never allowed to enter system update mode. It still runs, still responds, but small errors are not fixed. Temporary data is not cleaned up, and over time, performance gradually declines. Your brain operates on a similar principle. If it does not have the opportunity to switch to optimization state in darkness, the repair processes will be delayed or incomplete. EEG studies show that nighttime light reduces the amplitude of delta waves, the type of wave characteristic of deep N3 sleep, and this is precisely the stage where recovery occurs most strongly. At the same time, light increases the activity of the sympathetic nervous system, keeping the body in a state of mild alertness, preventing heart rate and blood pressure from dropping to optimal levels. A 2020 study by the American Heart Association found that people who sleep in a lighted environment have an average heart rate 3 to 5 beats per minute higher than those who sleep in complete darkness. This number may sound small, but stretched over thousands of nights, it creates a significant difference. The important thing is that you do not notice these changes in individual nights. You do not wake up and think that last night my delta waves were lower than normal, but your body does notice. It responds in a cumulative way. You feel a bit more tired, a bit less focused, and over time the decline becomes more obvious. This explains why many people think they are sleeping enough, but still do not feel recovered. They are going through sleep time, but not achieving the biological state that sleep is designed to provide. Sleep is not about you stopping activity, but about you switching to a different mode of activity, a mode that requires very specific conditions to activate. And that condition is not a better mattress or a perfect room temperature, but a clear environmental signal that night has truly begun. When that signal is interfered with by light, the transition process is disrupted. Your brain is still working, but not in the mode it needs to recover. And this is the key point. You do not need the brain to rest. You need it to switch states correctly. If you do not provide deep enough darkness, you do not allow that transition to happen fully. And when that does not happen, everything behind it, from cell repair to neural network optimization, is affected. Once you see sleep as a biological control process, you will begin to see that hormones do not work in the more or less way people usually think, but work according to time, rhythm, and a very precise sequence. And light is the factor that determines that rhythm. In your body, hormones are not released randomly, but according to cycles called circadian rhythms, controlled by the SCN I mentioned earlier. One of the most important hormones in this cycle is cortisol. Many people hear cortisol and immediately think of stress, but in reality, cortisol is an essential hormone that helps you wake up, increases energy, raises blood sugar, and prepares for daytime activity. In a normal cycle, cortisol peaks around 6 to 8 in the morning, right before you wake up, a phenomenon called the cortisol awakening response. After that, it gradually decreases throughout the day and reaches its lowest level at night, when the body needs rest. This is a very stable rhythm, and it depends directly on light signals. When morning light hits the eyes, the SCN sends signals to increase cortisol, helping you become alert. But when darkness appears at night, cortisol must decrease to make way for melatonin and recovery processes. The problem occurs when light appears at night, especially artificial light. Research from the National Institutes of Health and many other sleep research centers has shown that exposure to light at night can increase or keep cortisol at higher than normal levels at the time when it should be decreasing. This creates a disruption in the system. Instead of switching to rest state, your body still maintains part of the active state. And this not only affects sleep, but also affects how you feel the next day. When cortisol does not decrease properly at night, you do not achieve deep recovery state. And when cortisol does not increase properly in the morning, you wake up feeling sluggish and need caffeine to make up for that deficit. This creates a loop that many people experience. Difficulty sleeping at night, difficulty waking up in the morning, and dependence on stimulants during the day. But the problem is not that you have too much cortisol or have too little cortisol, but that cortisol appears at the wrong time. This is the point I want you to pay attention to. In biology, timing is more important than quantity. You may have normal average cortisol levels, but if it appears at the wrong time, the system is still disrupted. This is also true for melatonin. Melatonin and cortisol work as two opposite sides of the same system. When one increases, the other must decrease. During the day, cortisol is high and melatonin is low. At night, melatonin is high and cortisol is low. But when you introduce light at night, you blur this boundary. Melatonin is suppressed, cortisol does not decrease enough, and the body is stuck between the two states. This is not just a technical problem. It has real consequences you can feel. You may feel mild, but constant tension, a state many people call chronic stress, not because there is a clear stressor, but because your hormone system never truly switches to complete rest state. Endocrinology studies have shown that disrupted cortisol rhythms are linked to increased risk of anxiety, depression, metabolic disorders, and even cardiovascular disease. And once again, light is the fundamental factor in all of this. You do not need a major event to disrupt your hormones. You only need exposure to light at the wrong time, repeated every night. Your body will respond according to that signal, not according to your intention. The important thing is that hormones are not something you can control directly. You cannot order cortisol to decrease or melatonin to increase, but you can control the signal that the system responds to. And that signal, in this case, is light. When you provide light at the right time, the hormone system self-adjusts. When you provide light at the wrong time, the system shifts. This is a simple principle, but with very great impact. You do not need to change your entire life to improve hormones. You only need to adjust the environmental signal, and in most cases, that means reducing light at night and increasing natural light during the day. When you do that, you are not forcing the body to change. You are allowing it to return to the rhythm it was designed to follow. And when that rhythm is restored, your hormones will automatically return to balanced state without complex intervention. So when you think about hormones, do not just think about levels. Think about timing, because in biology, time is not only important, it is the determining factor. There is a very clear connection between the light you are exposed to and the way your body processes food, but it is often overlooked because people only focus on nutrition without looking at the control system behind it. Metabolism is not a fixed process, but changes according to circadian rhythms throughout the 24 hours. One of the most important factors in this process is insulin sensitivity. That is, the body's ability to respond to insulin, to move glucose from the blood into cells. Research in chronobiology shows that insulin sensitivity is highest in the morning and early afternoon, then gradually decreases as the day ends. This means the same meal is processed more efficiently by your body during the day than at night. This is not a choice, but a biological design that has existed for a very long time, when humans mainly ate during periods of natural light. However, in the modern environment, artificial light has completely changed this context. A 2015 study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences showed that just poor sleep or circadian misalignment for a few days can significantly reduce insulin sensitivity, putting the body in a state similar to prediabetes. This happens even when diet does not change, showing the problem is not in the food, but in the metabolic control system. Nighttime light plays an important role in this disruption. When you are exposed to light in the evening, especially blue light from screens, you delay melatonin and keep cortisol at higher than normal levels. This causes the body to misinterpret the time of day, leading to metabolic organs such as the liver, muscles, and fat tissue operating out of phase. When you eat in that state, the body does not process energy as efficiently as when synchronized with the natural circadian rhythm. Epidemiological studies have shown a link between nighttime light and increased risk of obesity. A 2019 study on more than 40,000 women showed that those who slept in a lighted environment had a higher rate of weight gain compared to those who slept in complete darkness. This is not because they ate more, but because the way their bodies processed energy was changed. Another important factor is eating timing. In a natural environment, humans rarely eat after sunset, but in modern society, late dinners or midnight snacks are common. When you eat at night in a lighted environment, you create a conflicting signal in the body. Light tells the brain it is daytime, but the internal systems are still in nighttime state. This desynchronization disrupts the way the body processes glucose, lipids, and energy in general. Research from the University of Chicago showed that just 1 week of circadian misalignment can reduce glucose processing ability, equivalent to aging biologically by several years. This shows that metabolism is much more sensitive to circadian rhythms than people usually think. A meal is not just energy, it is a biological signal, and the effectiveness of that signal depends on the timing it is introduced into the system. When the timing is wrong, the response is also wrong. This explains why many people have a healthy diet, but still have problems with weight or blood sugar. They are optimizing nutritional input, but not optimizing the environmental signals that control how the body uses that input. When darkness is properly established at night, circadian rhythms are resynchronized, and metabolic systems begin to function more efficiently. The body processes glucose more stably, insulin response improves, and energy is distributed more appropriately. The important thing here is that the body does not respond to food independently, but responds to food in the context of the entire biological system. Light is the factor that determines that context. Therefore, the question is not only what you eat, but when you eat and under what light conditions. When these two factors are not appropriate, the metabolic system will not function correctly, regardless of food quality. This brings us back to a simple but very powerful principle. Your body is designed to operate according to the rhythm of light and darkness. When you respect that rhythm, the system operates smoothly. When you break it, problems begin to appear. Another system that you rarely link directly to light, but is strongly affected, is the cardiovascular system. And the interesting thing is that your heart does not operate at a fixed rate throughout the 24 hours. In a normal biological cycle, your blood pressure drops at night, a phenomenon called nocturnal dipping. This drop is usually around 10 to 20% compared to daytime. And this is not a small detail, but an important part of the recovery process. When blood pressure decreases, the blood vessels rest, the heart does not have to work too hard, and the entire circulatory system has the opportunity to rebalance. But this only happens when the body receives a clear signal that night has arrived, and that signal once again is darkness. Research in the field of cardiovascular and sleep has shown that nighttime light, even at low levels, can reduce or even eliminate the nocturnal dipping phenomenon. A study published in the journal Hypertension of the American Heart Association followed people who slept in an environment with light around 10-20 lux and found that their blood pressure did not decrease fully during the night. This means their hearts continued to work almost at daytime levels, even while they were sleeping. And when this phenomenon occurs continuously for many years, the risk of cardiovascular disease increases significantly. Lack of nocturnal dipping has been linked to increased risk of chronic hypertension, stroke, and coronary artery disease. This is not an indirect link, but a clear biological mechanism. If the system is not allowed to rest, it will be overloaded over time. Heart rate also follows a similar circadian rhythm. During deep sleep, heart rate decreases. The parasympathetic nervous system dominates, and the body switches to a relaxed state. But nighttime light disrupts this process. Studies using heart rate monitors show that people who sleep in a lighted environment have a higher average heart rate during the night compared to those who sleep in complete darkness. A 2020 study by the American Heart Association recorded a difference of about 3 to 5 beats per minute. This number may sound small, but if you multiply it by millions of heartbeats per year, you will see the difference in the load the heart has to bear. The important thing is that the cardiovascular system not only needs to function efficiently, but also needs time to recover. Daytime is for activity, nighttime is for rebalancing. When you sleep in darkness, the body receives a clear signal to switch to this state. Blood pressure drops, heart rate slows, blood vessels dilate, and the system self-repairs small damages accumulated during the day. But when light is present, even weak light, this signal is blurred. The SCN does not receive the clear message that night has begun, and the cardiovascular system does not fully switch to recovery mode. This does not wake you up, but it keeps the body in a half-rest, half-active state, where recovery does not occur fully. This is a form of silent biological stress, not causing obvious symptoms immediately, but accumulating over time. Many people can live in this state for many years without realizing it, until problems like hypertension or heart disease appear. What is noteworthy is that in many cases, the cause is not lack of exercise or poor diet, but chronic disruption of circadian rhythms due to light. This changes the way you view cardiovascular health. You not only need to eat well and exercise, you need to provide conditions for the system to recover every night. And that condition is not a tracking device or a type of medication, but a very simple environmental signal: darkness. When darkness is deep enough and stable enough, the cardiovascular system can perform its function completely. When this signal is interfered with, the recovery process is shortened or incomplete. This explains why two people with the same diet and exercise level can have different cardiovascular health, simply because their sleep environments are different. One sleeps in complete darkness, the other sleeps in dim light, and that difference repeats every night, thousands of times throughout life. This is not a small factor, but a fundamental variable in the system. So when you think about your heart, do not just think about what you do when awake, but think about what happens when you sleep, because it is during that time period that the cardiovascular system is reset. As long as you do not obstruct it with light, Parallel to the systems already mentioned, your ability to resist disease also depends very strongly on what happens during sleep, especially in a dark environment. The immune system does not only respond when you get sick, it continuously monitors and handles potential threats in the body, and most of this work is optimized at night. In deep sleep state, the body switches to a priority recovery and defense mode, where immune cells are activated more strongly and redistributed to function more effectively. Research from the University of Chicago has shown that just sleeping poorly for a few nights can reduce the activity of NK cells, or natural killer cells, by up to about 70%. This is a very large number because NK cells play an important role in recognizing and destroying viruses, as well as abnormal cells. When their activity decreases, the body's first line of defense is significantly weakened. What is noteworthy is that this decline does not only occur when you completely lack sleep, but also occurs when sleep quality is reduced. For example, when you sleep in a lighted environment. In addition, sleep is directly related to the production of cytokines, signaling molecules that help coordinate immune responses. Some cytokines are only produced or increased strongly during sleep, especially during deep sleep. These molecules help the body respond to infections, regulate inflammation, and activate other immune cells. When sleep is disrupted or does not reach sufficient depth, the cytokine production process is affected, making the immune system respond more slowly and less effectively. Studies from the 2000s have shown that people who sleep less than 6 hours each night have a significantly higher risk of infectious diseases compared to those who sleep a full 7 to 8 hours. However, the problem is not only in the number of sleep hours, but also in the biological state achieved during that sleep. Nighttime light plays an important role in degrading this state. When light appears, melatonin is suppressed, and this directly affects the immune system. Melatonin is not only the signal of darkness, it also has an immune-regulating role, helping to enhance the activity of some immune cells and reduce excessive inflammatory responses. When melatonin is not produced at the right time and in sufficient amounts, the immune system loses an important coordinating signal. This does not make your body stop working, but makes it function less efficiently. Some studies even show that nighttime light can alter the expression of genes related to immunity, reducing the ability to respond to infections and increasing the risk of chronic inflammation. This is a process that happens gradually, not causing obvious symptoms immediately, but accumulating over time. You may not notice the difference after one poor night of sleep, but after many months or years, your immune system may become weaker and more vulnerable. The important thing is that the immune system does not operate independently. It depends on the body's overall circadian rhythm, and that rhythm depends on light. When you provide darkness correctly, you create conditions for the immune system to switch to optimal operating state, where cells are activated at the right time, signals are transmitted accurately, and the recovery process occurs fully. When you disrupt this signal with light, you do not turn off the immune system, but reduce its efficiency. This may not cause immediate consequences, but changes the body's long-term resilience. In an environment where you are constantly exposed to bacteria, viruses, and stress factors, small differences in immune efficiency can lead to big differences in health. This changes the way you view healthcare. You not only need to focus on what you put into the body, but also need to pay attention to the environment in which the body operates, especially at night. Darkness is not a secondary factor. It is a necessary condition for the immune system to function correctly. To understand why all of this matters so much, you must look at the issue on a much larger time scale. Not a few years or decades, but hundreds of thousands of years of evolution. Homo sapiens has existed on Earth for about 200,000 years, and for nearly all of that time, the light environment humans experienced was completely different from today. The day-night cycle was determined by the sun, with strong light during the day and near absolute darkness at night. There was no electric light, no screens, no artificial light extending activity time. When the sun set, light intensity dropped rapidly from tens of thousands of lux to nearly zero, and the human body evolved to respond precisely to that change. Studies in chronobiology show that the human circadian system is tuned to track this cycle with very high accuracy. The SCN, melatonin, cortisol, and a host of clock genes like SLUC and BMAL1 all operate based on natural light signals. This means your entire physiology, from sleep, hormones, metabolism to immunity, is built on the assumption that night is dark. Electric light, which you consider normal, is actually an extremely new phenomenon in evolutionary terms. The incandescent bulb was only widely commercialized from the late 19th century, and 24/7 electric light use has only become common in the last roughly 100 years. Compared to 200,000 years of evolution, this is an extremely short period for the human body to adapt biologically. Evolution does not operate on the timescale of modern society. It requires thousands or even tens of thousands of years to produce significant changes in biological structure. That means your body today is basically the same as the body of someone living tens of thousands of years ago, but the environment around you has changed completely. This is what scientists call evolutionary mismatch, a misalignment between biology and environment. Your body still waits for darkness to activate important processes, but the modern environment rarely provides that darkness. Instead, you live in a world where light is always present, at home, on the street, on screens, even when you are getting ready to sleep. This creates a situation where your biological system continuously receives signals that do not match how it was designed. You cannot learn to adapt to this by willpower alone, because this is not a behavior, but an automatic biological response. The SCN does not know you are living in the 21st century. It only knows whether there is light or not. And when it receives light at night, it responds as if it is daytime, regardless of what you think. This explains why so many modern health problems, from insomnia, hormone disorders, to obesity and cardiovascular disease, are linked to circadian disruption, not because your body is broken, but because your environment no longer resembles the environment your body was designed to function in. You may think you have adapted to electric light because you can stay up late, work at night, and use electronic devices, but behavioral adaptation does not mean biological adaptation. Your body still responds in the old way, and those responses accumulate over time. This does not happen immediately, but over thousands of nights, the difference becomes clear. This is why understanding evolution is important in this context. It gives you a reference frame to evaluate the current environment. When you know what your body was designed for, you can recognize when the environment is mismatched. And in this case, the difference is very clear. You are trying to sleep in an environment your body was never designed to sleep in. Electric light brings many benefits, but it also brings consequences we often do not realize. And because these consequences do not cause immediate impact, they are easy to overlook. But when you view them in the long-term context, you will see that they affect nearly every system in the body. So the question is not whether your body can adapt to light, but whether you can adjust the environment to fit your body. Because in the dialogue between biology and environment, biology always wins in the long run. Look around at how you live every day, and you will see one thing very clearly. The modern light environment never really turns off. The city does not sleep. Screens are always on, and the natural day-night cycle has been artificially extended. The 24/7 society you live in operates on continuous light, from street lights, LED billboards, indoor lighting, to light from phones, computers, and TVs. According to the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, nighttime urban light in many areas can range from 5 to 50 lux, and in bedrooms, light from electronic devices or night lights often falls in a similar range. This means many people almost never experience complete darkness in the biological sense. Even when you turn off the main lights, light from screens, small LED indicators on devices, or light leaking through windows from the street is still enough to activate the light sensing system in the brain. A 2020 study from the Journal of Clinical Endocrinology and Metabolism showed that more than 90% of adults in the United States are exposed to artificial light within 1 hour before sleep, and most of them are exposed to light with a high blue spectrum, the type of light with the strongest impact on circadian rhythms. This creates an environment completely different from the one the human body evolved to adapt to. In nature, the transition from day to night is clear and rapid. Sunlight can reach 100,000 lux during the day, but when the sun sets, light intensity drops to nearly zero. This change is a powerful signal for the body to switch states. But in the modern environment, that transition is blurred. Light does not disappear. It only decreases to an intermediate level, where the biological system does not receive a clear signal. This is exactly what scientists call circadian disruption. It is not a sudden event, but a prolonged state where the body continuously receives inconsistent signals. You may stay up late under lights, look at your phone screen at midnight, or sleep in a dimly lit room, and all of this sends conflicting information to the brain. Part of the system thinks it is still daytime, while another part tries to switch to night. This misalignment affects not only sleep, but spreads across the entire biological system. Epidemiological studies over the past 2 decades have consistently shown links between nighttime light and many health problems, including sleep disorders, obesity, type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and even some types of cancer. For example, the World Health Organization has classified night shift work, a condition of prolonged nighttime light exposure, as possibly carcinogenic, group 2A, due to its impact on circadian rhythms. This does not mean light is the direct cause of all these diseases, but it is a foundational factor that changes how the body functions. When circadian rhythms are misaligned, other systems like hormones, metabolism, immunity, and cardiovascular are all affected, as we have seen in previous sections. The important thing is that this misalignment is not something you easily notice in daily life. You may be used to staying up late, used to screen light, and think it is normal. But normal socially does not mean normal biologically. Your body does not adapt to nighttime light the way you think. It only tolerates and adjusts within its limits. And when those limits are exceeded over a long time, problems begin to appear. This explains why many people feel chronic fatigue, have trouble sleeping, or face health issues without a clear cause. They are living in an environment where the most basic signal, the light signal, is continuously distorted. And because light is the central controlling factor of circadian rhythms, this distortion spreads throughout the entire system. You can change your diet, exercise, or try other methods, but if the light signal remains wrong, you are working against your own biology. This is what makes the problem hard to recognize. The cause is not a specific factor you can easily point to, but a feature of the modern living environment. Light has become so common that you no longer see it as an important variable, but in reality, it is one of the most powerful variables in your entire biological system. So when you look at modern society, you do not only see convenience and progress, but also a fundamental mismatch between how we live and how our bodies were designed. In all the systems I have mentioned, there is one interesting thing. You do not really need complex equipment to know if they are working correctly, because your body continuously provides feedback signals, if only you pay attention. Unlike some specific medical indicators like blood pressure or blood sugar, there is no single number that can tell you whether your circadian rhythm is right or wrong. You do not have a simple measure like gait speed in geriatrics to evaluate the entire system, but that does not mean you cannot measure it. Instead, your body uses a set of very clear functional signals. One of the first signals is the ability to fall asleep. In a well-synchronized system, you do not need to try to sleep. You feel naturally sleepy at a certain time, usually within 10 to 20 minutes after lying down. If you lie in bed for 30, 40, or 60 minutes and still cannot sleep, that is not a problem of willpower, but a sign that the signaling system is misaligned. Another signal is how you wake up. In a synchronized state, your body often wakes naturally close to the time natural light increases, before the alarm goes off. This is not a random phenomenon, but the result of cortisol rising at the right time and melatonin decreasing in the correct cycle. If you need a loud alarm, multiple snoozes, and still feel sluggish after waking, that is a sign that your biological clock does not match your sleep schedule. Research in sleep science shows that people with stable circadian rhythms usually have low sleep latency and little dependence on alarms, while those with misalignment often need external stimulation to wake up. Another important signal is your energy level during the day. In a correctly functioning system, your energy does not fluctuate strongly. You have a stable level of alertness from morning to afternoon, with a slight natural dip in the evening as the body prepares for sleep. But in a misaligned state, you may experience clear peaks and valleys, feeling alert late at night but tired in the morning. This reflects the phase shift of cortisol and melatonin we mentioned earlier. Studies from Stanford University and other sleep research centers have shown that daily energy fluctuations are a strong indicator of circadian desynchronization. In addition, you can look at your subjective feeling of recovery. After quality sleep, you often feel mentally clear, quick to respond, and able to concentrate well. If you frequently feel brain fog, sluggishness, or lack of focus, that may be a sign that your sleep is not achieving the necessary recovery state. The important thing is that these signals are not random. They are how the body reports its state. You do not need to measure brain waves to know if you slept deeply. Your body already tells you through how you feel and function. But in the modern environment, many people have become so used to the misaligned state that they consider it normal. They think that having trouble sleeping, difficulty waking up, or daytime fatigue is an inevitable part of life. But if you look at the biological data, those are signals that the system is not functioning correctly. One very clear sign I want you to pay attention to is dependence on the alarm. If you need a loud sound to pull you out of sleep every morning, that means your body has not completed the sleep cycle when you wake up. And if that happens continuously, you are living in a state of chronic misalignment. This is not a small problem, because it affects the entire system we have discussed, from hormones, metabolism to immunity, and cardiovascular. The important thing is that your body always responds honestly. It is not influenced by your beliefs or habits. It responds directly to the signals it receives, especially light. When the signal is correct, the response is good. When the signal is wrong, the response changes accordingly. And if you learn to observe these signals, you can understand what state your system is in without complex equipment. So instead of looking for a perfect number or a single indicator, start by observing your own body. Do you fall asleep easily? Do you wake up naturally? Do you have stable energy during the day? These simple questions can give you more information than you think. And when you connect those signals to the light environment you are living in, you will begin to see clearly the link between cause and effect. Because ultimately, your body does not lie. It always lets you know when the system is right and when it is misaligned. Now let us look at what happens when you change the input signal in a simple but consistent way. Because the body does not respond randomly. It responds according to a clear ordered sequence. Right in the first night, when you reduce light before sleep and create a truly dark environment, you may notice a small but clear difference. You fall asleep faster and deep sleep time increases. Studies using polysomnography show that simply reducing nighttime light can increase delta wave amplitude in NREM from the very first night, which is directly related to recovery. You may not feel a big change the next morning, but the system has begun to adjust. By the first week, the changes become clearer at the hormone level. Melatonin begins to be released earlier and more stably, while morning cortisol rises more correctly timed. Research in chronobiology shows that resynchronizing light signals can readjust the melatonin rhythm within 3 to 7 days. This means your body does not need months to respond. It begins adjusting almost immediately when the signal changes. During this period, many people notice they depend less on alarms and wake up more easily in the morning. By around the third week, changes in energy become more pronounced. You begin to feel more stable energy levels during the day, with fewer fluctuations and less morning fatigue. This is the result of hormones, sleep, and the nervous system beginning to function in sync again. Studies from Stanford University have shown that improving sleep quality can increase cognitive performance and reduce fatigue within a few weeks. This is not a psychological effect, but a real physiological change in how the body manages energy. By around the second month, deeper changes begin to appear, especially in cognitive function. You may notice better concentration, faster responses, and clearer memory. This relates to processes like memory consolidation and neuroplasticity we mentioned earlier, functioning more effectively in a synchronized system. Neuroscience studies show that long-term sleep improvement can increase cognitive performance, reduce stress, and improve mood. The important thing here is that all these changes do not happen at once, but in a logical sequence. The body does not turn back on immediately. It adjusts part by part, starting from the input signal, then spreading to hormones, sleep, energy, and finally cognitive function. This is an ordered system, and each step depends on the previous one. This also explains why many people give up too early. They change the environment for a few days, but do not see big results, and they think it is not working. But if you understand this response sequence, you will see that the body needs time to adjust each layer. The important thing is, you do not need to intervene in each system individually. You do not need to optimize hormones, optimize sleep, optimize energy independently. You only need to change the environmental signal, and the system will self-adjust in the order it was designed. This is the point where everything becomes very different from the common approach. Instead of trying to fix each individual problem, you change the root cause, and in this case, that cause is light. When you provide darkness correctly, you do not force the body to change. You allow it to return to the state it was designed to reach. And when that happens, the systems begin to self-synchronize without complex intervention. This is not a hypothesis, but a principle observed repeatedly in many studies and in practice. Your body does not need to be taught how to function correctly. It already knows how to function. The problem is that the signals it receives in the modern environment are often mismatched. When the signal changes, the response also changes. And what is noteworthy is that this change is often faster than you think. Not in many years, but in a few days, weeks, and months. This is a process you can observe directly. If you pay attention to the signals your body provides, you will see sleep change first, then how you wake up, then energy levels, and finally how you think and feel. All of this is part of the same system, and they respond to the same signal. So when you think about improving health, you do not need to start with complicated things. You can start with a very basic change, creating proper darkness at night. There is a very common trend in how modern people approach health, which is looking for a quick solution, a hack, something that can replace adjusting the environment. But in this case, that does not work. You can buy supplements. You can use sleep tracking devices. You can try relaxation techniques, but none of them can replace the basic biological signal your body needs, which is darkness. Melatonin pills are a classic example. They are widely used as a solution for insomnia, but as I explained earlier, melatonin is not the cause, but the result of a correct signal. When you take melatonin, you are trying to insert part of the response into the system without changing the conditions that trigger that response. Clinical studies show that melatonin can help regulate sleep in specific cases like jet lag, but its effectiveness is very limited if the light environment remains unchanged. In other words, you are trying to fix the system from the inside, while the input signal is still wrong. The same thing happens with sleep tracking apps. In recent years, wearable devices like Fitbit, Apple Watch, or sleep analysis apps have become popular, providing you with data on sleep time, sleep stages, and many other metrics. But the problem is that data does not change biology. You may know you sleep poorly, but knowing that does not automatically improve sleep. A 2017 study in the Journal of Clinical Sleep Medicine even introduced the concept of orthosomnia, where users become obsessed with their sleep data without actually improving sleep quality. This shows that measurement does not replace changing conditions. In addition, there are many products and methods promoted as sleep solutions, from red lights and blue light filtering glasses to sound machines or relaxation therapies. Some of these may help, but they do not replace the core factor. You can reduce the impact of blue light with filtering glasses, but if you are still in a lighted environment, the signal is still not completely correct. You can create relaxing sounds, but if light is still present, the biological system is still interfered with. The important thing is that your body does not respond to tricks, it responds to signals, and the main signal it uses to control sleep is light. This is why no hack can replace darkness. You cannot trick the SCN with an app. You cannot convince the hormone system to function correctly by willpower. You can only provide the conditions the system was designed to respond to. When you understand this, your approach changes completely. You no longer look for complex solutions, but begin to look at the most basic environment you can control. This does not mean modern tools have no value, but their value only appears when they support the correct environment, not when they try to replace it. A smartwatch can help you recognize the problem, but it does not solve the problem. A supplement can create temporary effects, but it does not fix the cause. And if you continue to rely on these solutions without changing the environment, you will continue to face the same problem. This goes back to a very simple but very powerful principle. In biology, you cannot replace foundational conditions with substitutes. You must provide the correct conditions. In the case of sleep, that condition is darkness. When darkness is deep enough and stable enough, the system self-adjusts. When darkness is insufficient, no solution can fully compensate. This is not a limitation, but how the system is designed. And the interesting thing is that the real solution is the simplest thing, requiring no technology, no large cost, no complex intervention. It only requires you to change how you interact with light. When you do that, you are not adding a new factor to the system. You are removing an interfering factor. And when the interference disappears, the signal becomes clear, and the system begins to function correctly as it was designed. If you put all these pieces together, you will begin to see a complete picture. What seem like separate systems in the body are actually operating as a unified network, and all of them depend on the same input signal. The brain, hormone system, immune system, cardiovascular system, and metabolism do not function independently. They continuously exchange information and adjust each other through circadian rhythms. The suprachiasmatic nucleus, SCN, plays a central role, like a coordinator, receiving light signals from the environment and distributing that information throughout the body. When this signal is clear, the system operates smoothly. When the signal is interfered with, everything begins to shift. The important thing is that everything we have talked about, from melatonin, cortisol, deep sleep, glymphatic, to blood pressure and immunity, are not separate phenomena. They are different responses of the same system to the same signal, and that signal, once again, is light and darkness. Studies in chronobiology, especially the work of scientists like Jeffrey C. Hall, Michael Rosbash, and Michael W. Young, who won the Nobel Prize in 2017 for discovering the molecular mechanism of the biological clock, have shown that nearly every cell in the body has its own clock, and these clocks need to be synchronized with the SCN to function correctly. When light is provided at the right time, the SCN keeps all these clocks running in the same rhythm. But when light appears at the wrong time, this synchronization is broken. The liver may think it is daytime, while the brain is trying to switch to night. The immune system may not be fully activated, while the nervous system maintains an alert state. This is exactly the misalignment we talked about earlier. But when viewed at the system level, you will see it is not just a small problem, but a comprehensive disruption. A 2016 review study in Nature Reviews Endocrinology showed that circadian disruption is linked to nearly every major disease group in modern society, from metabolic disorders, cardiovascular disease, to mental disorders. This does not mean light is the only cause, but it is a foundational factor influencing how all these systems operate. What is noteworthy is that you do not need to change each system individually to improve the whole. You do not need to optimize hormones with medication, optimize immunity with supplements, or optimize cardiovascular with a separate method. When you change the input signal, that is light, you are affecting the convergence point of the entire system. This is why a seemingly small change, like reducing light at night, can create large effects across many different aspects of health. It is not a direct impact on each system, but an adjustment at the foundational level. When the signal is correct, the system self-adjusts. When the signal is wrong, everything shifts accordingly. This also explains why many single interventions do not bring the expected results. You can improve part of the system, but if the central signal is still wrong, that improvement will be limited. This is an important principle in systems biology. You cannot optimize the parts if you do not optimize the central control point. And in this case, that control point is the light signal the SCN receives every day. This brings us to a very simple but very powerful conclusion. Darkness does not only affect sleep, it affects the entire body. When you provide darkness correctly, you do not just sleep better, you resynchronize the entire biological system. The brain functions more efficiently, hormones are more stable, immunity is stronger, cardiovascular recovery is better, and metabolism becomes more balanced. And all of this happens not because you add something to the body, but because you remove an interfering factor from the environment. This is what makes this solution different from many other approaches. It is not complicated, does not require high technology, but it impacts a very deep point in the system. And when you understand this, you will begin to see health not as a collection of separate problems to be solved, but as a system that needs to be synchronized. At this point, perhaps the most important thing is no longer adding new knowledge, but looking back at everything that has been said from a simpler angle, because science, at its core, does not create your body. It is only a tool to help you understand how the body has always functioned. What studies from Harvard, Stanford, or the National Institutes of Health have done over many decades is not invent sleep, hormones, or circadian rhythms, but describe mechanisms that have existed for hundreds of thousands of years. When Jeffrey C. Hall, Michael Rosbash, and Michael W. Young received the Nobel Prize in 2017 for discovering biological clock genes, they did not create that rhythm. They only explained how it works. This leads to a very important realization. Your body does not need to be taught how to sleep, recover, or balance. It already knows what to do, as long as you do not obstruct it with the wrong environment. Throughout this entire journey, from the brain, hormones, immunity, cardiovascular to metabolism, you can see a common pattern repeating. Every system responds to signals, and that signal is light. When the signal is correct, the system operates smoothly. When the signal is wrong, the system shifts, not because your body is weak, not because you lack willpower, but because you are placing it in a context it was not designed to handle. And the interesting thing is that the solution does not lie in doing more, but in doing less, specifically removing interfering factors. In the modern world, we often think that to improve health, we need to add vitamins, add devices, add methods, add information. But in this case, the direction is the opposite. You do not need smarter light. You need less light at the right time. You do not need a complex system to control sleep. You need to return the environment your body was designed to function in. This is not an abstract idea. It is supported by thousands of studies in chronobiology, sleep science, and neuroscience. Studies show that simply changing the light environment, especially reducing nighttime light and increasing natural daytime light, can significantly improve sleep quality, stabilize hormones, increase metabolic efficiency, and reduce disease risk. But what matters more than specific numbers is the principle behind them. Your body does not operate based on your intentions. It operates based on the signals it receives. You may want to sleep early, but if light tells the brain it is still daytime, you will not feel sleepy. You may want to wake up early, but if hormones have not switched to daytime state, you will feel tired. And this is the point where everything becomes very clear. The question is no longer how long you sleep or how hard you try, but whether you provide the correct conditions for the system. So I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself a very simple question that can change the way you view the whole issue. Are you sleeping, or are you giving your brain the conditions to function correctly? Because these two things are not the same. You can lie in bed for 8 hours, but if the environment is not right, you do not truly achieve the state that sleep is designed to provide. And when you understand this, the way you approach sleep will change. You no longer try to sleep better. You begin to create the environment for sleep to happen correctly. And that is where I want to end. You do not need to sleep better. You need the right environment. If you want to understand more deeply how the body really works and optimize it according to biology, please subscribe to the channel so you do not miss the next content. See you in the next video, where we continue to explore things your body has known from the beginning, but you have never had explained.